AI Builder Week. I'm Luby from Product School, and we're so excited to host you across 13 hands-on AI workshops. Quick context on who we are. Product School is the learning platform for AI builders. We offer live online training taught by AI product leaders who ship AI for a living every single day. Everything you see over this week is a taste of what our members get. 10 live AI certifications, over $50,000 worth of AI tools, weekly live AI workshops, an in-person ProductCon ticket to either San Francisco, New York, or London, access to our full catalogue of on-demand content, and an exclusive alumni community of product professionals who are all actually building. Product School is where product people become AI builders. A few of our most popular courses are Claude Code for PMs, where you run Claude Code like your own engineering team, Vibe Coding, where you build and ship real products end-to-end with AI, AI evals, so you can define what good actually looks like for your AI Product Management, our most popular course, applying AI across the whole development cycle, and our brand new course, Agentic Workflows and Loops, where you orchestrate a fleet of agents running your product work around the clock. And 5 more. New cohorts start every week. One more thing before we get started. This week only, we're offering $1,000 off all our courses. That runs from Monday, August 3rd through to Friday, August 7th. Again, that's $1,000 off all our courses this week only. Simply enroll at productschool.com. Now let's get into it.
Most PMs are using AI. Few have let it change how they work. That's the split right now. PMs who prompt and PMs who ship. The fastest teams aren't better staffed. They're better led by PMs who build instead of brief. And that's where Product School comes in. Product School is the learning platform for AI builders. We offer live courses, small cohorts, taught online by AI product leaders, shipping at Google, Meta, Amazon, and Netflix. Acquire the skills of a real AI builder. Claude Code for PMs, prototype, analyze, and ship before a ticket is written. Vibe Coding. Build end-to-end applications from a prompt, no engineering background required. Agentic Workflows and Loops. Product management for the agentic era, from loop design to production trust. AI evals. Build the pipelines that make non-deterministic AI trustworthy enough to ship at scale. AI product strategy for leaders. Build roadmaps and contextual moats that separate serious AI products from stalled pilots. 10 certifications total, from foundation to expert level. Access to $50,000 worth of AI tools, exclusive AI workshops, conference ticket, on-demand content, and more. This week only, $1,000 off all our courses. The builders who move now are the ones who lead. Offer only valid during AI Builder Week.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Haefele. I'm Chief Product Officer here at Webflow. For those of you that don't know, Webflow is an AI marketing platform. We help teams and the agencies that support them not only build beautiful, expressive, on-brand websites that power their business presence online, but also help those teams manage the entire website lifecycle. So not just the build phase, but also continually adding content to their site so that it's relevant to their audience day after day, and then giving those teams rich insights into how their content is performing with integrated analytics, as well as then the ability for them to continually optimize their site with new content, new variations, and continual sort of personalization that helps drive real results for their sites. So I'm excited to talk to you all today about not Webflow itself, but how the product team at Webflow has gone under a pretty radical transformation, especially over the last 6 to 9 months, as the nature of the work that we do as product managers and product designers has really changed because of AI. So with that, we'll dive into the presentation here. And we'll talk about this concept that internally we're referring to as building backwards. And the reason that we call it that way is because the software development lifecycle, it's really a process that all of us have followed since really going back to the 1970s, and it's being turned on its head in a pretty radical way. This is a big deal for all of us. It's upending nearly every process that we built around this software development lifecycle. It's changing how we plan, how we spec, how we design, and ultimately how we ship. So here's the flow that we all grew up with. I think you start with the idea that actually you refine that more requirements with the user experience itself, pressure test, those requirements, then engaging with engineering on actually writing the code and working with product QA design to then test what was actually built and then finally deploy it. The Agile movement tried to break this waterfall, and it was successful to some extent. While our cycles definitely got shorter over the last decade and a half, especially compared to back in the 80s and 90s when teams were shipping on floppy disks and then later CDs, we all know that we've essentially been following some version of this same process. And the reason for that is because we really had to. This middle part of this process of writing code, that really took a long time, and as a result was very expensive. And so getting to market as quickly as possible meant more upfront planning to reduce the amount of time spent changing the code later. So there was this economic pressure that really sort of locked us into this waterfall, even if we were able to create mini versions of it and ship more iteratively when we weren't stuck on actually shipping onto physical media. But with the rise of agentic development, this is really flipping on its head. Now you can describe what you want in plain language. You can have an agent that'll then build your idea in minutes, and you have the opportunity to then have the first thing that you react to, rather than being a brief or a doc or a mock-up. It can actually be a working application. And what this means for us is that we actually have to let go of all the intuition that we built up over our careers about what's going to be hard for our teams to implement, what's going to be really easy, and ultimately how long things take. And those intuitions were really built for the different world. And the tricky part is the job to be done for us as product team leaders is not to replace that old intuition with the new intuition. Because the reality is we have to be in this constant state of evolution, because the foundational models and the harnesses around them and all the tooling that we use are getting better and better every month. And so what's hard today may actually be just a one-shot prompt next month. And so it's not that we have to develop a new sense of, hey, this is actually really easy now. It's that we have to develop a habit of constantly pushing the limits on what we think might be possible and continually testing that boundary, because the boundary is always moving. And so in this new world, this process runs almost completely backwards. You do still start with the idea, but now the next step is usually deployed code. Then you get to test it and see what the agent came up with. You play with it, and then you start to shape it and bring intentional design to the experience. And then when all is said and done, that's the moment when you can codify the requirements and create documentation for all of the rest of the team and your support functions and your customers, so that they know what all is possible with the software that you've created and how it's meant to work. So look, I know there's probably a part of you that's thinking, hey, this sounds great in theory, but this is a massive and sometimes likely painful journey that we're all sort of embarking on in this moment. And there's a risk that we could turn our products into AI slop. And so is this really worth it for us to go through this change? But let me tell you, I have really, really strong conviction that this is actually going to dramatically increase the quality of the work that we all drive, and ultimately the products and the experiences that we're creating for our customers. So the Standish Group has been publishing something they call the Chaos Report for decades. And every time they come out with this report, their finding is essentially the same. Projects that don't succeed generally fail because of abstract requirements. And the reason for that is humans, whether it's you as a product leader, product manager, product designer, or just as often your stakeholders, the reality is it's hard for us to know for sure what we want until we actually interact with something and we realize this isn't right. It's not working. And if you've really built up a strong skill as a product manager or product designer, you know how to interrogate that intuitive sense so that you can get to a more concrete understanding of why you don't like what's not working, and you can begin to anticipate that. But often when you're working with stakeholders or with customers, they don't have that skill set developed. They just have that intuitive sense. And so you show them something that you think is what they want, and they told you that's what they want. But once they actually get to interact with it, they realize that it was not. And that's really at the heart of why projects that don't work out ultimately fail. And so you can think of it like as it's in this old world that we've been operating in. You were asking your teams and your customers and your stakeholders to essentially commit to a floor plan before they'd ever even stood in the house that you're building. But with agentic development, you can actually walk your stakeholders and your customers through 20 different houses all within the course of a day so that you can get to a really good understanding of what they actually do want because they can experience it. And so by the time you actually are writing the requirements down, you're writing them as someone who has already lived inside of the product. And so it's not that we're skipping requirements altogether. It's just that they are crystallizing at the very end of the process. And, it turns out that this change is actually some of the best practices in software development that we've been grasping at for a long time, and they're finally fully realized. In fact, I tend to think that this might actually be the purest expression of agile development. If you go back to the Agile Manifesto, you can see all of these concepts baked right into it. The number one tenet of the Agile Manifesto is working software over documentation. This new inverted software development lifecycle actually starts with working software. Their next tenet was customer collaboration. This is what I just described. We're working with customers with real working alphas immediately, not reviewing a Word doc or a spec. The next tenet is responding quickly to change. This is so much easier when you can ask an agent to iterate on a PR with real working code. Every iteration is a response to change. The Agile Manifesto at the time was a vision for a world that we actually didn't have the technology for yet to fully realize its promise. But now here we are almost 25 years later, and the technology, the tools that we all have as product leaders have finally caught up to that dream. And as I was saying before, the feedback that we're able to get from our customers and stakeholders is so much better because those customers and stakeholders are able to react to a real working version of software rather than an abstraction in the form of a document or a spec or a mockup. It's real working software, so the feedback that they can give you is at much higher fidelity. And so you can go through many more iterations to get to a higher quality product faster. And there's also another engineering best practice that this new software development lifecycle mirrors, and that's test-driven development. You often hear practitioners of test-driven development or TDD talk about this concept of red-green refactor, where they start the code in a red state, where they've defined a test for how it should work. They see that it is not working because the software hasn't been built yet. They write the software to pass the test. That's when the test goes into a green state. And then after they get it working, then they refactor so that it's nice, clean code and it's scalable. And this vision, this philosophy from TDD of visiting the destination first, even if it's broken, exactly parallels with what we're talking about with agentic development. But it scales this loop from being iterated on with units of code or particular functions that are defined within the code to actually doing this at the feature level, where product teams now can describe and then build and then react and then repeat that process over and over again really, really quickly. And so again, it's not that we're creating a new playbook here. We're actually leveraging ones that have existed for a while, but product teams have really struggled to actually put into practice. And so when you do this, the nature of the value that we all bring to our work changes considerably, because what we're talking about is AI really absorbing this production layer. Things like iterating over particular pixels. And so what's left is that the majority of our work moves from the actual production and implementation of the idea to curation and taste and judgment. And I think that's actually really exciting. I know that for some people, there is this sort of existential question of, well, if AI can do all my work, what value can I bring? But I think it actually gives us the opportunity to work on the more creative aspects of the work that we all drive today. And I think for designers in particular, their work shifts from designing a particular feature, instead spending more times on the system itself, creating the rules around the design system, the components, the tokens, spacing scales, accessibility standards, the things that actually teach the agents that are implementing the code and the features themselves what good looks like before they even attempt to generate. And so it's really higher order work that we're asking our teams to put forward. And then on the flip side, at the end of the process, the designer then becomes more of the critic and actually giving feedback to what the agent produced. So making sure that there is this final quality gate between saying that, hey, an agent actually built something that works, and saying, hey, this is actually high enough quality that our customers will actually use what we've developed here. So I've spent some time here talking about how we think about this in theory, but I want to shift to talking about this in practice, because as I mentioned before, the product team at Webflow has been going on this journey for the past little over 6 months now. And so I just wanted to share some real insights of how we've approached this and lessons we've learned as we've evolved along the way. So first, let me jump over here to this. So this looks a lot like Webflow, but this is actually not Webflow. This is a code repo that we use as a design mockup. So it mimics a lot of the UI of Webflow. This isn't a Figma file. This is actually defined in code. It's moderately interactive, just like our real software. And where we began this journey was we asked both our product designers as well as our product managers to begin to use agents to iterate on this prototype repo, so that when they were creating ideas for new projects, they were doing it as interactive prototypes defined in code. So not fully functional software, but still at a much higher level of fidelity than you would get from a spec or from something like a static mockup like you might do in Figma. And so this is where we started. We enabled teams with this repo, and then they would use tools like Cursor or Claude Code to generate prototypes. One of the things that we then found is that people started creating a large volume of these. And so sort of the next problem for us to solve was on a higher order, which was how do we create more visibility and more organization to all of these essentially design artifacts that everyone across the product org was making. And so this is an internal tool that our design leads built called Atrium. And this is a place for us to organize and catalog all of these design concepts that our teams are building. And so this is a thing that I think we're going to continue to see not only product teams, but really all teams that are driving work in this new era do, which is create their own tool set. So Atrium here is a place for teams to showcase work that they've been doing. And it's meant to be flexible because people are creating artifacts in lots of different mediums. It may be a pre-recorded Loom video or an actual video file from Drive they've uploaded. They may need to link out to a particular repo that they've deployed somewhere for people to interact with. And so because all of the nature of these artifacts has become less uniform over time, it became really helpful for us to create our own tool to find a place to collect them. So that was sort of one of the first iterations of this journey that we went on. And this is where we started. The next was we wanted to create clarity for the product team on what our expectations were for product managers and product designers in this new era of AI. And so I'm going to show you a document that we developed internally because we wanted to make those expectations really clear in our product manager career ladder. So I won't read through this whole thing, but I wanted to highlight a couple of concepts and then also show you how we communicated it out to the team, because I think this creates some helpful framework that you might apply to your own teams. We really set about thinking about AI competency in 3 ways. The first is the work that a PM does. And you can think about this for product designers as well, but their actual craft. So things like doing customer discovery, driving strategy, creating specs, enabling the go-to-market functions. So how can that all be accelerated with AI was the first thing. The second was delivering AI-powered product experiences. So it's not just enough for us to use AI to make our traditional work go faster, but also making sure that the product experiences we were creating were giving our customers AI superpowers as well. So that was the second dimension. And then the third was really leaning into this concept of product team members as builders, so that they're actually directly building functional software that gets delivered to our customers. So we aligned around these 3 concepts. And then the next thing that we did was we took our existing career expectations for different levels, and rather than create a whole nother set of requirements for a career ladder specifically for AI, we took our existing organization and we added in expectations around AI along those 3 dimensions. And so this is a diff view we created where it has both the original set of expectations at different levels, and then how these new principles around AI competencies fit into each of those. So there is also a combined version of this document. But as we were working through the change management here, we wanted people to clearly see where each of these expectations folded into the existing career ladder that we already had. All right, so that was the next step. And then once we set this expectation around PMs as builders especially, some of the feedback that we got was that we needed to create time in the calendar for our team to work on actually becoming builders themselves and actually shipping code to production. And so we went through a few iterations here. These started as a quarterly builder day where we did specific enablement for teams to understand, how do I use tools like Claude Code and Cursor? And eventually we got to the point now where this is something that as a team we do every Wednesday. So we worked with the team and all our cross-functional partners to clear any standing meetings from Wednesday, so that everyone had dedicated time that they could work on building up this skill and creating this, building up this muscle of building. And so we have a lot of fun sort of rituals that we do around this, not only a dedicated Slack channel, but we also have this, what we call this builder board here. And so people are able to track how different PMs and product designers and members of our ops team are actually creating work to improve the quality of our product experience. So we wanted to make sure this was really visible to the entire organization, and then obviously celebrate people who are leaning in here. And so this is fairly recent for us. We just announced in our Hall of Builders, this is one of our PMs who had the most PRs that were actually shipped to production. For us, it's not about the number, but it's about celebrating the people leaning into this new version of the craft. And so there's different ways that teams can hold up examples of people that are leaning into this new way of work. But this has been a fun way for us here. So this is the next step. And then the next thing that I wanted to show here was we then begin to develop our own tool set. And so not only do we have teams using tools like Cursor and Claude Code and Codex, but we've also been creating our own harnesses so that our best practices can get baked in by default, so people don't always have to remember the right way to prompt an agent, for example. And then also creating integrations to our already work. So Flower is the name of an internal harness that we've developed that not only does our product org use, but also our engineering team to drive a lot of the code changes that they work on now. And this also has a direct integration with our Slack. And so, for example, if I have an idea for an improvement to the product, or better yet, I hear about a point of friction from a customer, I can come into Slack and just type in a quick prompt here. So I'll kick this off. We won't have time to actually see the whole feature being implemented, but just so you can get a sense of this. So we have a feature in Webflow where teams can define in their design system their design tokens or variables. But sometimes this has like a cold start problem. So let me go ahead and write a prompt here. When customers are viewing their variables tab and they haven't created any yet, give them a prompt to enter their primary and secondary brand colors, then a button to generate those variables and a complementary set of color variables using aliases and functions that reference the brand colors. Oops, I made a mistake here, which is I forgot to mention Flower. So let me go ahead and do that and type that again. Okay, great. So you can see Flower responded right away, and it's going to start kicking off an agent to begin trying to figure out what the heck I was even talking about, and then drafting a PR. So it'll come back to me with questions if it needs clarification. But really what it's going to do is it's going to kick off an implementation of this idea. So again, before it's fully crystallized, I can begin to play with real working software before I think through, is this even a good idea? What's the naive implementation the agent's going to make? How can I make the design better? All of that happens with the PR first rather than at the very end. And then you can see here, so this is a UI where we can get visibility into how our team members are using Flower. So we can see the prompts and the types of things that they're creating. And we have a team dedicated to making Flower better and better. So it can do things like reference screenshots, be able to get more context from a Slack thread if we're referencing some conversation that we've had from another customer that we want to pull in here. And so as we lean more into agentic development, we've continued to see exponential acceleration in our productivity by creating more and more tool sets for us to help accelerate our work. And then the last thing I wanted to show here, so this is a PRD based off of a feature that someone had prompted an agent to build. And once the feature was implemented, then it gave the agent this prompt here, which was take a look at the PR. And in this case, there's actually multiple PRs in a stack. And then it said, hey, use the Webflow PRD template to create a PRD. And so what the agent then did was it looked at the entire commit history for this PR. And then it took that, understood what the changes were that the code was asking for in the back and forth with the PM when it was going through all the iteration. And then taking that context and marrying it with our PRD template. And so it automatically generated all of this documentation, which is several pages worth, going through all of these different features that this code change touch, coming up with a clear, crisp articulation of the product, the problem statement, the solution that was implemented, the target users and the personas that this feature is really oriented towards, where there's competitive capabilities in the market. And all of this would have taken a PM at least a couple of hours to handwrite. But instead, as I mentioned before, in building backwards, all of this documentation happened at the very end, and it was written by an agent who was able to say, hey, let me look at the final code that we created. and then create all the context for all of the other stakeholders, whether it's customer support or product marketing, so that they can quickly understand what this is and help us bring it to market. So that was a little bit about how Webflow is actually bringing this philosophy of building backwards into reality. So just to recap quickly, this was a journey for us. We didn't start with our product org shipping code. Instead, we started at the beginning, which was how can we use code-backed AI prototypes to create higher fidelity artifacts for us to iterate on. Then we created internal tooling to help us navigate all of this explosion of artifacts that we were creating. Then we really leaned into a thoughtful progression of enablement, making sure that we were training our teams on what it means to use these new tools that didn't exist a couple of years ago. And we kept iterating and sort of raising the expectations from prototype to functional software to actually shipping PRs into production to now Builder Wednesday is just a part of our regular weeks. We also built up more tooling to continue to think about how can we remove the friction for the product org that is building in this way. And so you saw me kicking off an agent from a Slack thread. So I didn't have to totally switch context to use a different tool. And I didn't have to think about all the best practices that I would have to manually ask an agent to do if I was just using a vanilla tool rather than this custom built harness that we've implemented as a Slack app. And then we also set a goal for ourselves. So in this current quarter, we set a goal for not only engineering, but all of our product team members, our designers, members of our ops team, that they all have shipped code that actually lands in production. And so this was our first quarter we just finished where we had this as a goal. And I'm really excited that we made it. So we had literally 100% of our team shipping code to production. And if you think about just the product org, at the beginning of the calendar year, that was probably between 0 and 5%. And so this was a big change. But I think because we were so intentional about creating this progressive enablement strategy, as well as better and better tooling, we were able to pull this off. So, and then again, we set the right expectations for the team and really wove AI skills into our career ladder. So that there was clarity for everyone on how their work was changing and how we were going to help them navigate that change. So this is I think my last slide here, but you can think about us and the way we design this process and this transformation that we were leading our teams through is one, we started with prototypes. Two, we were really intentional about how we enabled the team and sort of continually raised the expectations so that we could get all the way to our end goal of shipping code to production for people that had never done it before. We also built specific rituals so that there was protected time for everyone to go on this journey. Then we set a goal for ourselves and we measured our progress along the way. Then finally, we codified it so that it was really clear to everyone what our new expectations were for them. Okay, so that was building backwards. I think what I would just leave you with before we get into a couple questions is that, the reality is the hard part of software is no longer generating code, which used to be where all the time and investment really was. Now it's really more about knowing what's worth building and recognizing quality when you see it and iterating fast enough so that you can get to the version that matters. So the arrow of product development is really running the opposite direction of where it used to. And as I said at the beginning, this really has to change nearly every process that we built up along the last couple of decades. Going through this kind of change and taking your teams along with you, you're going to break some eggs along the way. That's okay. I think one of the things that's really important is we're all figuring this out together. One, it's worth us sharing sort of our wins and our losses so we can help learn together. And two, as you take this back to your teams, be sure to bake in grace into the process. Make sure that your system is resilient enough to handle like setbacks when things don't go as expected, because we're all figuring this out together. But when we do, the sky is really the limit here. Okay, so with that, I'm going to pull up. I know there's a couple of questions that have been shared here, so I'm going to jump into some of these. Okay, so the first question, it says, this is from Summer. When you build first and then vert the flow, what is the best practice for style guides? Do you load up your Figma or Claude design with current style guides so that your ideas are consistent? Or is it best to prototype without the distraction of style? This is a great question. Thanks for sending this in, Summer. I think I'll start by saying it does depend a little bit on where your existing product is in its life cycle. So if you're in a 0 to 1 phase or closer to it, you may actually find more innovative ideas if you don't start with a specific style guide. But for most of us that are building on top of established software that has existed for years, or in some cases over a decade, I definitely believe that it is best to start with a style guide with the design system, so that what the agent generates is really close to what humans on your team would generate too, which is that the feature exists inside of the system, so that it's not very confusing or jarring for your users what and how they should work with this new thing that you've implemented. And so I do think that it's really important for product teams and designers to invest in codifying their design systems. Now, as agents and foundational models get better and better, we're increasingly seeing them do a good job of inferring what the design system would be if you give them access to your existing code base, so they can use that as context. So that's maybe a shortcut, but you'll definitely get better results if you've codified your design system. All right, the next question here from Danique is, sorry if I mispronounced that. How does user research and discovery fit into this process? I think they're more critical than ever. And one of the things that excites me about the speed and leverage that product teams can get from AI, I mentioned at the end that PRD that was mostly drafted by, or that was entirely drafted by an agent. I'm sure APM would go through and refine that document, but generating that would have saved them hours. And so the question is, well, what do they do with those extra hours that they just saved? And the answer should almost invariably be spending that time with customers, doing user research to understand where there are points of friction with the existing product and where there are points of friction with their workflows that aren't being addressed by software at all. And it's those insights that then, we go back to the software development lifecycle. Started with, in either case, starting with an idea. And those ideas come from spending time with customers. And so the more customer time we spend, the more insights we have and the more ideas that we can put through this process. Okay, just a couple of questions left here before we wrap up. The next one is from Claire. Claire says, this sounds amazing as a PM. What kind of reaction does this approach get from developers? Yeah, that's a great question, Claire. And this is something that we spent a lot of time thinking about as well. Because there's certainly a version of this where, just like we all have fears about what AI is going to mean for our work, you can imagine a developer or engineer saying, well, if the product team's doing all the coding, what value am I bringing to the team? But let me just say that's not at all how we think about it. One is that this gives our engineering team the opportunity to spend their time working on the harder problems where the solution is extremely engineering backed, where it needs to be something that needs intense architecture in order for a new capability to live at scale, or to use some sort of new infrastructure or pipeline that wasn't even possible in our system before. So one, our engineers get to spend time on harder problems, which is more fun work for them and creates more value for our customers. One area that we're still working through, though, is that now we have our entire product org opening up PRs that need review. And so there is definitely a bottleneck on review capacity from our engineering team. And so we're definitely in the process of investing more and more in how can we leverage agents to help review the code that the product org is writing. We're definitely not at the place where 100% of that is happening. So we want to make sure we have really strong partnership with our engineering team members, so they do have capacity to review all the work that we're doing before then it goes out to our customers as well. Okay, last question here today is from Vivek. And the question is, what were some of your losses? What were some fails or ideas that did not go well? Oh, this is a great question. You might have noticed I had a Yoda slide about unlearning what you have learned. I'm a big Star Wars buff, as you might have noticed from the lightsaber behind me. I also I have a quote from Yoda that I keep on my desk, which is the greatest teacher failure is. You learn so much from your failures. And one of the ones was when we started doing these builder days and asking PMs to ship code to production. Actually, a failure on my part directly was we asked teams to find specific parts of our user experience that were creating friction. We sometimes refer to these as paper cuts internally. We said, hey, start here and get a change or to a paper cut shipped to production. And I was like, okay, I'm going to really push the limits here. I'm going to create an entirely large new capability agentically. And I got all that code working after lots of iteration. We had it in a test environment. And I was really excited about that. What we learned though, when he said, okay, hey, engineering team, can you review this? They were pretty blunt with me and shared that this was way too big to have been developed this way. It was essentially unreviewable in the way that the PR had been organized. And while we all thought there was a lot of value in the capability, it actually then created a couple weeks of work or more for the team to actually essentially rework it so that we could ship it into production. And so through that, we learned a lot about how do we, one, make sure that our product team is focused on the types of changes that have a clear path to production. And two, if we're going to take on something bigger, because it is important, like I said before, to test the limits of what's possible, is to think through how can we organize the code in a way that it's easier for humans to review if it is going to be a bigger project. And then how can we enable more and more rounds of agentic review so that we're limiting the burden that this work is creating on our engineering team for extra things that they have to go review by hand. All right. Well, thanks so much for the questions. Really appreciate those and for your time today. This was really fun to talk about. Definitely feel free, if you're going on this journey as well, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always excited to learn about how folks from any part of product are working through this and how it's changing their work and how they're able to deliver more value to their customers. So thanks again so much and looking forward to connecting in the future.
And that's a wrap. A huge thank you to today's speaker for building live with us, and to every AI builder who showed up and built along. Your recording and resources are on their way to your inbox. And if you're registered, you're in for the rest of the week. Make sure to check out the agenda and join your favorite sessions live. And one last reminder, Product School is where product managers become AI builders. And this week only, we're taking $1,000 off all our courses. $1,000 off ends Friday, August 7. Enroll today at productschool.com. An hour shows you what's possible. A live cohort with a product leader is how it becomes the way you work. Thanks for building with us.
I'm very excited to announce the launch of our new company, Product Partners, an AI consulting firm to help product teams drive successful AI transformation. Product School continues to serve individuals through its AI training programs. Product Partners is a natural extension to help entire product teams at large enterprises navigate AI transformation through training and implementation. Same shared mission, to help companies build better products. Product Partners is not your typical consulting firm. We embed our AI product leaders and forward-deployed engineers alongside your team to actually build. The deliverable is not just a deck that never leaves the shelf. It's actually a working AI operating model and a team that is ready to harness it. And we have the strongest reputation in product. For over 12 years, we've upskilled over 1,400 product teams around the world, and we've built the largest community for product professionals with over 2 million members.